So we talked about two areas of our involvement in these industries. One was the radar altimeter space. The second was general purpose radar systems. And then the third area, which is maybe more interesting, is taking those expertise that we use for those two spaces and applying it to the communication space, the radio space. So the radio communication has the same sort of issues with testing that the radar exists in the radar space, but it's further complicated by the fact that you need two-way communication. So and optical fiber actually lends itself quite well to that whole area, where we sort of benefit from all the work that's been done in optical fiber over the years with digital communication. So bidirectional communication in that space is very common, and it's accomplished simply by using different wavelengths for different signals traveling in different directions. And so we will build bidirectional systems for communication networks using the same sort of techniques that give variable distance capability. So stationary radio and a moving radio is quite easily achieved. Two moving radios, multiple moving radios, all can be achieved in these sorts of optical networks with full propagation loss and multipath and Doppler generation that you would expect to see in the real world applications. So the same sort of advantages and benefits that you get from that our radar engineers get from those types of systems, they get in the communication space as well, with a couple of additions. And notably, one is that in the radiocom space, there's a lot of overlapping bands. And there's a lot of bands that are limited sometimes just spatially. They can't radiate over a particular geographic area. So a lot of times the field testing for communications networks are a lot trickier than radar spaces. Also, radars tend to be fairly narrow band radiators. The antennas are narrow band radiators, whereas communications networks can often be very wideband radiators. So the key term there is radiation. They don't want to radiate if they can help it. Many times it requires FCC approval to radiate, or they're radiating in an area that might be populated and they don't want to radiate for hazard, health hazard, safety hazard reasons. So being able to take that now and do it in a laboratory instead of out in the field is a real advantage to the folks that are working in that communication space. So Eastern OptX has produced systems testing radios from a few megahertz up to 10 gigahertz plus, and most recently we've been working in the WiMAX space, up in and around 4 to 6 gigahertz. And the effort there really has been focused on extending the range of data communications in that frequency band. It's a relatively new frequency band anyway, so there's a lot of development work being done for general purpose WiMAX, but the sort of geographical distances have been quite small, sort of hundreds of meters kinds of applications. And there's a lot of interest in using that space for longer distance applications, maybe up to 5 or 6 kilometers. And the reason being, of course, you always want to try to get more out of the existing frequency band. That's number one. But number two would be there are many applications where you want to detect signals from further distances. Either physically it's difficult to get near the transmitter or the receiver, or you simply want to be able to have the same tool, data communication tool, when you're close to a radiator as opposed to a greater distance. So for those reasons, we began work on a system that would let those engineers have that same sort of tool that the radar engineers use to reproduce that propagation path in the laboratory and save the same sort of problems that are faced with field testing, including being able to add both intentional and unintentional interferers. That's less common in the radar world, although it's not non-existent. It does crop up. Of course, there are plenty of EW situations where people intentionally interfere, but in the communications world, it's everywhere. Every cell phone, every Wi-Fi emitter, there's all of this radiation out there that can cause problems with either intentional or unintentional other communications that are going on. So a lot of work has to be done to make sure that the encoding is correct and that the signatures can be seen and detected properly and provide reliable data communications. Pretty much everything now is data communications. There's very little analog anymore, and that data, while the integrity of the signal is quite good, it's easily disrupted, if you will. And so that's what these engineers spend their time doing, to try to perfect those algorithms that provide the reliable data communication. And we give them a tool that they can use in their laboratory to verify that, in fact, it's working, and give them the opportunity to optimize the performance, to perfect the algorithm in the laboratory so that they're getting peak performance. And it may not eliminate completely the field tests, but maybe knock them down in half or 75% of what might be required to complete a design. So really, to summarize, I mean, the three big areas that we work are providing test tools for radar altimeter engineers, general purpose radar systems, surveillance radars, tracking radars, proximity radars, and then now finally in the communication space, providing those same sorts of tools to replicate the channel. That's what we do. We reproduce the channel that you're going to see in the real world and bring it into your laboratory so that you can do the optimization and design that you need for real world applications.